Shalom, shalom, everybody. Shalom, Jerry.
Shalom, shalom.
Shalom, Miriam. Shalom, Brian. Nice to see you. Welcome to all those who are watching on the outside. Tonight is the Torah portion is called Tzav, which means command. And it was a difficult one for me because, especially for this program tonight, because if we just read all again about the various offerings, that we're going through the offerings again, he's speaking about there's ordinances about how to not eat meat, about how to dress, all these different things, and they seem boring at the beginning, and I said, I don't want to bore people by just reading it through. So what I decided to just to read a little bit of it, and also focus on the Haftarah, which is the portion from the prophets from Malachi. So let me share the screen, and we will begin, and let's pray. Lord, I pray that we can have a good class tonight, that what you want me to say will come out of my mouth, so that people will learn to love your word. All right, so here we begin with, we're going to Leviticus 6:1. It's Tzav, and Tzav means command. God, Yud He Vav He, spoke to Moses saying, command Aaron and his sons thus. This is the ritual of the burnt offering. The burnt offering shall remain where it is burnt upon the altar all night until morning, while the fire on the altar is kept going on it. So the first thing that popped into my mind was the idea of command. Who is commanding who? Obviously God. God's telling Moses to command Aaron about the certain ways of offering. Now, if the idea of command has to do with free will, because if we didn't have free will, we couldn't command God. God couldn't command us. We would not. We would be like the angels or like a robot, where we didn't have a choice to choose between good and evil, between whatever we were going to choose. So here, the idea of command is that we have free will, we can make a choice, and they had a choice to make. Were they going to be obedient to God, or were they not going to be obedient? And this whole idea of obedience is actually what I'm basing the message on from this coming Shabbat. You know, from the time that we are 2 years old, that's the beginning of where children get a sense of their separateness, that they're separated from their mother. They're beginning to come into their own personalities. And what's the first thing that most children say? Usually it's, no, I do it. I do it myself. So right away at the beginning, we're seeing that, that's why we call it the terrible twos. And this is where we see that it's our nature to say no before we say yes. It's our first instinct. And we wonder, why do we constantly rail against God? Doesn't he only want the best for us? So here we continue with the Kohen. They're going to be dressed in linen breeches, taking the ashes to which the fire has reduced the burnt offering on the altar, and place them beside the altar. And it continues. I'm not going to read it all. Here we see a perpetual fire shall be kept burning, which is where we get the Ner Tamid in the synagogues. The fire had to keep going. It was a picture of us constantly keeping our fire going, keeping the light of God burning in our souls. in the next verses, we see there's going to be offerings of flour and oil. And here it says, this offering shall be eaten by Aaron and his sons. It shall be eaten as unleavened cakes, which has to do with Pesach. Pesach is coming next week. And this portion is coming just before Pesach. He says this matzah here, it says unleavened cakes in Hebrew are matzot, which is what we're going to be eating at next week at our seders. It shall not be baked with leaven representing the pride that's in us. You know, this has been a difficult week for me. I've really, really struggled with many things this week. And then I realized that always before the holidays, especially before the high holidays, there's always a spiritual battle that goes on. And that God wants us. One of the songs we sing at Pesach and during Yom Kippur is called "Search Me, O God, and Know My Heart. Try me and know my thoughts and see if there's any wicked way within me." Many of us struggle on this planet, and God allows us to struggle. And when we come to Him, like all these offerings were a picture of us going before God. And we're doing this at Pesach. We're going before Him, but not to search our heart really for sin, but to understand that it's a time of forgiveness. It's a time of thanksgiving, specifically thanksgiving, because He had brought us out of Egypt and He was bringing us to a place where He was going to hand us His commandments and we would be a light to the nations. It says only
a quick question, Peggy.
Yes.
Just to clarify, I think it's the Ner Tamid. Just to clarify, not to anyway. I thought it came from the lampstand, that the lamps are to be lit, not from the fire on the offering. Like, isn't the Ner Tamid is that the lamp should be lit eternally? Should not be put out?
Yeah. What does it say here?
The fire on the altar shall be kept burning.
Oh, here, and that's interesting. It's true. It's not the Ner Tamid. This is an Eish Tamid.
Yeah.
A perpetual fire shall be kept burning on the altar, not to go out. I guess that's another fire that had to be kept burning to show just how much work that the Kohanim had to do during the, well, I think also because every single day, if we think about it, the people of Israel were to bring their offerings. They weren't only on Shabbat or on the holidays. They could be any day of the week. If somebody did an involuntary sin and wanted to make things right, it's like going to see your psychiatrist or your psychologist. They would go to the temple, they would go to the Mishkan, and they would bring their offering. So these fire had to be kept going all the time, and so that the offerings could be brought to the altar. And then there, as we talked about last week, 5 different types of offerings. And the one with the ritual of the meal offering, which you liked, Miriam. Remember the grain offering?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, because it was a mincha. And
as well as the meat offering was
the meat offering, exactly. Yeah. The meat offering was also a mincha, which showed that it had nothing to do with the shedding of blood. And it's the same thing with the whole idea of the offering at Pesach. At Pesach, it didn't have to do with the offering. A lamb had to be brought into the house on the 10th of Nisan, and it would be offered on the 14th day. So it was in the home for 3 days. And during that time, the children, I'm sure, fell in love with this little lamb. And then it had to be, God commanded that this little lamb be killed, be put before, the blood put on the lintels and the doorposts of the house, so that the angel of death could not enter, could not take the firstborn male of the people and the firstborn male animal. If you were a firstborn female, you would be safe. But the idea is about obedience, because whoever obeyed, even if it was an Egyptian family who had seen everything that God had done for the Israelites, if they heard that commandment that they had to take the blood and put it on the doorpost, if they chose to follow what the Israelites did because they were afraid, they also would be saved, their firstborn males. And so it didn't have anything to do with sacrifice for sin, because the people in the house didn't say, "Oh, please forgive us." They were just being obedient to God. Now, what is left shall be eaten by Aaron and his sons. It shall be eaten as unleavened cakes. In the sacred precinct, they shall eat it in the enclosure of the tent of meeting. Again, it's not baked with leaven. Only the males among Aaron's descendants may eat of it. Let me continue on here. Here's another ritual of the sin offering, which is probably the asham. This is the hata'at. The hata'at and the asham were two of the offerings. And it continues on, but I didn't want to read all of it. I wanted to take some of the things that I remember reading that touched me. Here it says the guilt offering is like the sin offering. And the same rule, in other words, the Torah of it, God gave us instructions on how to do these offerings. And his idea in that is that he wants us to have order in our lives. At the very beginning, God was setting up the order for how the various ceremonies would be performed, not in a haphazard fashion, in contrast with pagan rituals who had altars built anywhere and everywhere, with their temples to their large variety of gods who were sought out to fulfill the wishes of their followers. The Creator was bringing order out of chaos, and he was continuing the pattern which he began in the first verses of Bereshit, where he went from tohu vavohu, which was chaos, into order. He sets a pattern for us. And one of the things that I wanted to read today that I thought would be interesting for us is the Haftarah portion, which we rarely have a chance to look at. And the Haftarah portion is the last prophet that's in the Tanakh. Jerry, would you like to read some of it?
Yeah, is that? Are you at the Haftarah now?
I'm at the Haftarah, exactly.
Behold, I am sending my messenger to clear the way before me, and the Lord whom you seek shall come to his temple suddenly. As for the angel of the covenant that you desire, he is already coming. But who can endure the day of his coming? And who can hold out when he appears? For he is like a smelter's fire, and like fuller's lye. He shall act like a smelter and purger of silver, and he shall purify the descendants of Levi, and refine them like gold and silver, so that they shall present offerings in righteousness.
So I was wondering why Haftarah, what it had to do with Tzav. But here we see that at some point in the history of Israel, the offerings became tainted. They were no longer offerings that were pleasing, like he talks about reach nochoyach, which is a pleasing. It's a spiritual. Reach comes from ruach, nochoyach, like from. I forgot. I'm sorry. I'm so tired tonight. Please forgive me. I'm really struggling. I've had a rough week, so I want to try to make it as pleasant as possible. But to tell you the truth, it's a very strong message. And maybe that's one of the reasons I almost feel like I'm going through an angst, like a spiritual angst. But here, what God is saying to us, look at who can endure the day of his coming? We talk about the Messiah coming. Who can hold out when he appears? He's going to be like a fire, like lye, that burns through us. And he shall act like a smelter and a purger of silver, purify the descendants of Levi, and refine them like gold and silver, so that they shall present offerings in righteousness. It's obvious that our offerings were not out of righteousness. Perhaps they were out of pride. Okay, Jerry, continue.
You're not sharing the screen for me.
I haven't moved anything.
Okay. Then the offerings of Judah and Jerusalem shall be pleasing to the Lord, as in the days of yore and in the years of old. But first, I will step forward to contend against you, and I will act as a relentless accuser against those who have no fear of me, who practice sorcery, who commit adultery, who swear falsely, who cheat laborers of their hire, and who subvert the cause of the widow, orphan, and stranger, said the Lord of hosts.
This is really powerful for me, because we don't realize that God set down very clear guidelines of how he wants his people to behave. And if we look at our people today, we're so involved in idolatry. And not only our people, but we are to be the example for the rest of the world. And take a look at what's going on in the world. It's really becoming crazy out there. But here God is saying, he's going to battle with us. I step forward to contend against you, and I will act. He's the great judge. He will act as a relentless accuser against those who have no fear of me. You talked about taking his name in vain before, Jerry, but so many people have no fear of God. They don't care. And we have to pray that God will reveal himself in the way that he revealed himself to our people in Egypt, when and look how he revealed himself, by bringing on the plagues. When we sit at our Seder table next week, we're going to speak about 10 plagues. And who is he upset about? Those who practice sorcery, all those involved in New Age and all those idolatrous theologies, sorcery, witchcraft, speaking to the spirits, those who go to seances. All these things are huge today. Committing adultery. And adultery isn't only about cheating in your marriage, which is bad enough, but it's also adulterating God's word. When we change it in any way, it's an adulteration of what he gave us. Who lie, who lie about other people and destroy their character. That's commandment number 9. Commandment adultery, I think, was 7. Who cheat laborers of their hire. God is constantly telling us, if somebody works for us, be fair with them. And here it's a constant theme in the scriptures. Take care of those who cannot take care of themselves. The widow, the orphan, and the ger. It says the stranger among us, the ger. that we are to take care of the stranger, those who come to live with us, and who are, in Israel, there are names that pop up, like a prophet, Obadiah, like Joshua and Caleb. Caleb was a Gentile who was a ger, who joined in with us. Obadiah was a Gentile who came to be with us. We have two other names later on who Akiva, Rabbi Akiva. Did you know he was a Gentile? He was a ger, but he became an Israelite. Those who want to join us, we have to allow them to join us and not say, oh, you just have to keep the 7 Noahide laws. That's totally a made-up thing. It has nothing to do with the Torah. Okay, here, Jer.
Yeah, Ruth was a Moabite as well.
Exactly.
For I am the Lord, I have not changed, and you are the children of Jacob. You have not ceased to be.
Exactly. God has not changed from the very beginning of time to now. And we are the children of Jacob. We're still here, no matter how many people have tried to wipe us out, because of him, not because of us.
From the very days of your fathers, you have turned away from my laws and have not observed them. Turn back to me, and I will turn back to you, said the Lord of hosts. But you ask, how shall we turn back?
So here he's talking about the very days of our fathers. Who are our fathers? Abraham,
Isaac, Jacob,
exactly. Moses, all our forefathers.
Yeah.
You've turned away from my laws. Here it says, chukim, the ordinances that we may not understand. And that's when I read Tzav and I go through all those things, all those the things that he's asking the priests to do. We don't understand them all, but he wants obedience. And he's telling us, you have turned away, you have not observed them, and he's begging us to turn back.
That's what I love. Turn back to me and I will turn back to you. It's
exactly.
Sometimes people say, I've done too many bad things. God will not listen to me. I understand that. That's a natural human tendency. Well, I've sinned too much and he won't. Here he says, turn back to me.
Exactly. And look at the word, ashuvah. This is where we get the word teshuvah.
Right.
He's not saying turn back to a religion, because at this point in our history, we were still at the base of Mount Sinai, getting ready to leave. We were about to celebrate the Pesach. There was no Talmud. There was no Torah written yet, no whole Tanakh. There was no New Testament. All we had was the commandments. And here he was going to be spelling out the chukim and the mishpatim and the mitzvot. He was going to be telling us that's what he wanted. He said, turn back to me. He wants a relationship with his people. And then it says, how shall we turn back? Here, go ahead.
Man to defraud God, yet you are defrauding me. And you ask, how have we been defrauding you? In tithe and contribution. You are suffering under a curse, yet you go on defrauding me, the whole nation of you. Bring the full tithe into the storehouse, and let there be food in my house, and thus put me to the test, said the Lord of hosts. I will surely open the floodgates of the sky for you and pour down blessings on you. And I will banish the locusts from you, so that they will not destroy the yield of your soil, and your vines in the field shall no longer miscarry, said the Lord of hosts.
Now, this, I have to tell you, 33 years ago, when I read these verses, I had just come out of the new age. I had just started a new job. I was working with a financial planner. Was so deeply in debt. I came back, I had 2 bags of clothes and nothing else. And I turned back to God. I turned to him. And I remember after I got my job, I had read this, and it says to tithe. I started to look into the tithe, what that meant. And basically a tithe is a tenth. Abraham tithed, Isaac tithed, Jacob tithed. Our people have learned how to be givers. And I would sit down whenever I had a paycheck, as I do today, and I would take a tenth of it and bring it to the congregation, give it to whatever, wherever I was being spiritually fed. And if I'm telling you, it says here, test me in this. I said, okay, God, I'm going to test you. And there were times I didn't know if I would have enough money even to pay my rent. But I said, no, I was try to bargain with God, maybe just this month. And then it was almost like he said to me, trust me, just let me show you what I will do. And I would give a tenth. And then suddenly money would come from a place where I had no idea, furniture, clothes. Literally, when I was ready to move from that small apartment that I lived in with my kids to a bigger place because I was earning more, I could not even move around my apartment. I had boxes everywhere, furniture everywhere. It was unbelievable. I didn't even know where all this stuff had come from. He says, I will surely open the floodgates of heaven for you and pour down blessings on you and banish all those who try to take away. It's interesting because here it says, I will banish the locust. And there's another verse in the prophet Joel where it says, I will restore the years that the locust has eaten. And I love that because he did that in my life. And it says, all the nations shall count you happy, for you will be the most desired of lands, says the Lord of hosts. Okay, Jerry, go ahead.
You have spoken hard words against me, said the Lord. But you ask, what have we been saying among ourselves against you? You have said, it is useless to serve God. What have we gained by keeping his charge and walking in abject awe of the Lord of hosts?
We can see how our people, we Israelites, the one he formed, he's saying, we have said it's useless to serve God. What have we gained by keeping his mishpatim? What does it say? Where is his charge? Ki shamrenu, to guard, mishmarto, shamarto. What it's almost like he's saying, you haven't guarded the things that I have told you to guard, and you haven't walked in abject awe of the Lord of hosts. I've had moments where I've stood in absolute awe of what he's done, and it's almost embarrassing to admit that there's times when I'm just so tired. And I say, it's useless to serve God. What am I doing?
That's the amazing thing that all of us in different levels on our walk with God experience this.
Yeah.
When we don't have a relief from the, let's say, terrible pain in our lives, whatever it is, it's very hard to trust that God is really there. It seems on this level, who's really saying that it's useless to serve God? When people go through suffering, it's very easy to ask that question, where are you, God?
Exactly.
And yet, he is there.
Exactly.
And it's really important to realize that.
It is. And I take it so seriously. To me, when I read these words, when I read the prophets and I read our Torah and I read our Tanakh, I say, oh my goodness, this is the answer for the whole world. And how many are interested? And then I said, then I say to myself, what am I doing? I feel useless. What's the point? Because you have somebody who gets on social media and they're showing how their chicken is feeding a rabbit or something, and they get millions of views. And I come on with the most golden, these words of gold that have so much value for the future of our planet. And how many people are interested?
But you know what? It's not mutually exclusive. The chickens feeding the rabbit or whatever, those are wonderful things, because I know you're not saying they're not, because they're God's creatures. And when I see things like that, I love to watch it. But the same people watching that don't know the source of that wonder. Sometimes when in growing up, before I had any idea of was there a God, wasn't not a God, whatever, I would just be washed over by a sense of wonder. And these are the very things that we see on YouTube without their source. Why do so many people watch these things? When you think of it in one sense, it's okay, they're cute, etc., but it's just unbelievable that this sort of thing exists. I remember a friend of mine had a friend who had an experience with the creator, with something bigger than him, and how this experience was fueled by his wonder at there being so many different kinds of, I know this sounds really silly, I've said it before, but he just could not believe there were so many kinds of fruit. He just kept, and he was just in awe, and he had this experience because God's creation was just so incredible.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
sometimes when you feel this sense of wonder that almost is beyond any experience you've had before, it's God's creation does show us his presence.
Exactly.
If you're open to it.
Exactly.
And so we account the arrogant happy. They have indeed done evil and endured. They have indeed dared God and escaped. In this vein, have those who revere the Lord been talking to one another. The Lord has heard and noted it, and a scroll of remembrance has been written at his behest concerning those who revere the Lord and esteem his name.
Yeah, here it's the Lord. I love this.
Never knew about this.
In this vein, have those who revere the Lord been talking to one another, like we talk to each other about, loving God, and he heard it and he notes it. And it's like remember when we read at Purim, when Mordechai had told about the two men who were trying to kill Achashverosh, and they wrote it in a scroll of remembrance. And here the Lord is noting those of us who talk about how we love him and and he writes it in remembrance.
Wow.
How we revere him and esteem his name.
And on the day that I am preparing, said the Lord of hosts, they shall be my treasured possession. I will be tender toward them as a man is tender toward a son who ministers to him.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Yeah.
And you shall come to see the difference between the righteous and the wicked, between him who has served God and him who has not served him. For lo, that day is at hand, burning like an oven. All the arrogant and all the doers of evil shall be straw. And the day that is coming, said the Lord of hosts, shall burn them to ashes and leave of them neither stock nor boughs. But for you who revere my name,
Revere.
better, but for you who revere my name, a sun of victory shall rise to bring healing You shall go forth and stamp like stall-fed calves, and you shall trample the wicked to a pulp, for they shall be dust beneath your feet on the day that I am preparing, said the Lord of hosts. Be mindful of the teaching of my servant Moses, whom I charged at Horeb with laws and rules for all Israel. Lo, I will send the prophet Elijah to you before the coming of that awesome, fearful day of the Lord.
And when do we wait? When do we call out for Elijah? At the Seder,
Pesach.
at Pesach, which is coming up. That's why we have a seat at the table for Elijah. What did you say, Miriam?
I just, it's really important to read these portions because I don't read them enough, but to hear it, like when he said, listen to your servant, my prophet Moses. I mean, just that, it's like, it's
Yes.
almost like embellishing the Torah. Like we know about Moses in the Torah, but it's almost like a way of describing, the cold, hard facts are given in the Torah, not just cold, hard facts, but the moral code for the whole world. But then it's just put into almost storybook form in the Haftorah and makes it, I don't know, it just embellishes it so well.
Exactly.
To me, like music,
Exactly. And when he talks about chukim and mishpatim, the chukim here are the two middle commandments, the Shabbat and the honoring of your parents. The mishpatim are the last five, your neighbor. So God wants us to listen to what Moses told us to do so that we could love our neighbor as we love ourselves.
The hukim are the more mysterious, the ones we don't have an obvious explanation for,
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
Is it lo or he shall reconcile parents with children and children with their parents, so that when I come, I do not strike the whole land with utter destruction.
So that's how the last prophet of the Tanakh ends. This is how our Bible ends. This is why they added.
Wow, nice, beautiful ending, eh?
Yeah, can you imagine? What an ending.
Yes,
So
beautiful.
Beautiful and frightening. He will reconcile parents with children and children with parents, so that when I come, I do not strike the whole land with utter destruction. It's almost like today, there's a threat.
That was a beautiful, thank you. That you even allowed me to read that. Thank you. It was very nice.
Your reading was perfect of it.
Yeah, it was nice to read something like that,
Yeah.
I really like to read that one. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. And if we read the history of our prophets, most of our prophets were killed by our own people. Because the prophets, a true prophet, tells people they're not politicians. They're not religious leaders. They don't tell people what they want to hear to be popular. They tell people what God tells them to say. And most of our prophets, I think, were murdered by us.
Yes, they murdered a lot of prophets.
Yeah.
And it's a statement somewhere, do my prophets no harm. I'm not sure where you know that, but it's somewhere, do not harm my prophets. If you like, I'll make a little comment on this last thing.
I would love it.
Yeah, I know. So I'm going to make a little comment here. When the Messiah comes, those who are gone are just going to be gone. Those who are okay and are going to be helped, God will forgive them because he knows our frailties. He knows that we are weak. He knows that humans need guidance and strength, and he accepts us with our frailties. So if we do half, he'll do the rest. For those who wish to come to God and they have stuff that has to be cleansed, it would be like you're standing, let's say your bones are the only thing, for example, are the only things that are clean. It will be like a fantastic wind, and it will just blow off all the evil from you, so that when you stand before God, you can only stand before him with your goodness. The evil cannot exist in front of God. For example, if you have a linen sheet, for example, and it's dirty and whatever, and you put it into Javel, the Javel will eat that sheet, the dirt, and completely, so what's left is just a frail, but it'll be totally clean, because nothing unclean can stand before God. So what I've taken from this prophet is that those he accepts, he will come strong and also cleanse them with a thorough cleansing. And in finality, with this Shear saying, he will take more of us than we think we deserve, because he knows our frailties and he loves us. And while he's not telling us just because he's going to forgive us, we should do what we want, he will forgive us because he knows who we are.
Yes.
I mean, not as strong as we could be, but we should still try to be as strong as possible.
That is our struggle. That's our journey.
That's right.
That's the journey of, do we obey or do we disobey?
Well, we're not required 110% to finish the journey, but we are required to move forward.
Yes. That's all we could do, is put one foot in front of another. Sometimes we'll take 2 steps forward. Sometimes we'll take 1 step back. And it feels like we have to almost begin again, but we never do. We always begin again at a higher level.
It's a beautiful, beautiful prophet. One of the more uplifting prophets that I remember, because many of the other prophets have a lot of warnings and stuff, but this prophet is really, it's a beautiful way. You said it's the final one. It's a beautiful way to come to the end that they chose this year. I think you would have chosen that chapter for yourself to be a finality, eh, Peggy?
Actually, no. It's the Haftarah portion, if you look at the Jewish calendar.
I'm just saying, but
Yeah.
you would have chosen this Torah to be as to sum up. It's a beautiful, positive.
But it's funny that you see it as positive, because I saw it in such a negative way.
I see it as very, very positive.
That's beautiful.
Those who cannot be saved, well, he can't. But those who can be and give a little bit, he's going to be coming. He's tough, but he's not going to be tough against you. He's going to be tough against your evil inclination. He's going to scare it away. So the good will remain.
Yes. Yeah.
That's how I'm taking it. And that's how I'd like our loved ones to take that as well.
Yes.
In a good way.
I think it's a good idea from time to time to look into the prophets, because Zechariah and Ezekiel, and they all have beautiful.
Zechariah, Bayom Ahu, Yeranoy Echad, Ushamoy Echad.
Yes.
That day, the Lord shall be one, and his name one. I think Zechariah 14:9.
Beautiful. There's so many beautiful prophecies that we have. Isaiah, beautiful.
I guess you sing that by Yom Hahu, don't you?
Bayom Hahu.
Yoim Hahu, Bayoim Hahu,
Yeh Adonai Echad, Ushemo, Ushemo Echad. Yeah, when we take out the Torah. Exactly. It's beautiful. Let's see, what else did I glean from this message? There were so many. Yeah, I wondered why Malachi was chosen to go together with Tzav, but it also has to do with before Pesach, this coming
And it's very
Shabbat.
nice that it comes before. It's very nice to come before Pesach. It doesn't always come before Pesach. That is because our calendar changes. So I'm not sure if this year always will fall. So just this year, it's falling before Pesach.
Exactly.
You don't have a class. You don't have a class next week, or you do?
No, next week is our Seder. Wednesday night is the Seder.
You have an online Seder too, or you don't?
No, we used to have a Seder on the second night because the first night is really the only one that's in the Torah. The second
Right.
night was added by the rabbis as
Well,
well
it's
as the eighth day.
it's just because to surround the date, because where we are, we have 2 nights. I'm not sure in Israel if they have 1 or 2. Some places they have 2 in Israel. I think Rosh Hashanah they have 2 days too. But just
Yeah.
because our time zone is different, so they do 2 different things.
But it should not be done the day after if that's the case, because this was instituted in Babylon when we were west of Jerusalem. Now we're east of Jerusalem. So it should be the day before for us to stay in line with Israel, not the day after. It just doesn't make
Right.
sense.
As long as my feeling is, as long as you do something, you do your best, and that's all you could do.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying, and I agree with you. However, when you're a religious leader and you're making up traditions and laws and rules for an entire nation that becomes such a burden on people, that take them away from God because of the rules become so burdenous, so heavy. And those who are on the outside, the nations, the Gentiles, who want to come in and they say, well, wait a minute, there's only one God, is there not? And we say, no, you have your God, you stay with yours. This is where it becomes a problem for me, because this is where Moses fought with our people. This is where Yeshua fought with the Pharisees and the Sadducees of his day, calling them hypocrites and telling them that they were forcing them to keep so many rules and regulations that they weren't even willing to do themselves.
I always take a little exception to putting everybody together like in one name. I know the Bible does that. Like they talk about whatever the Pharisees and the Sadducees, but I'm not sure if every Pharisee or Sadducee to 100% should belong in that negative category. Everyone is an individual, and with varying, there's no, with varying degrees from black and white and black. So I'm sure there were some people who were stricter and some people were okay. And
of course,
even you have those gangs, those Western outlaw gangs, and you had 7 outlaws. Well, you can have 1 or 2 that are real killers, and 1 or 2 on the other side really they don't like it, and so not everyone under a collective name is the same. Mind you, I know that the Bible does it that way, but
no, actually it doesn't, because if you look at it, you'll see that there was a Pharisee whose name was Nicodemus, Nicodemon, I think.
Good there.
And he was a good Pharisee. Many of the men, the righteous leaders who did not follow those who were corrupt, they left the temple and they formed a community called the Essenes. They lived in the desert. Yochanan, John the Baptist, Yochanan was an Essene. He lived out in the desert. eating honey and locust. He probably took the Nazarite vow. They have been turned into Christians, but they were not. They were Jews, and they did not want to stay in a corrupt temple. And
Right. So there you go. There you go. Just what I was imagining.
Exactly.
So not everyone, and even so, not everyone. They lump them together a lot, but as you said, there's exceptions to everything.
Exactly. And the religious group who fought against Yeshua, in the New Testament, sometimes it translates the word as the Jews, but it was really the sect of Judeans, who were a very ultra-Orthodox group who fought, who really, they were the ones who really had trouble with Yeshua, because he spoke against them. He gave his opinion. He said, you say this, but this, in my opinion, is what I say.
I'm not even sure how many people had a problem with that particular trial. There was a particular trial. It was at night. It was a few people. They hushed up.
They did it on purpose.
They did a hush hush.
Most
of the people were not like that. What they had 6, 7, 10 people, and these people were not full authority by their own anyhow.
Exactly.
And,
when he spoke, when he did his Sermon on the Mount, there were thousands and thousands of people there.
Exactly. So where were these thousands of people when a few people were bothering him, and were they in really control? We don't know who was controlling.
Well, they didn't know. They didn't know it was happening, because remember, he went to the Garden of Gethsemane at night, and it was the night before Pesach. People were home preparing for the Seder.
Right.
They weren't out, and that's when he was given up. That's when he was grabbed, and he was killed, condemned early in the morning on Pesach.
Yeah, there was only one guy who was partially against him because he was a little bit nuts for his own reasons, but the rest of his disciples were for him. So they're always talking about 1 or 2 people. What about the majority of people were good people?
Exactly. And the one you're talking about was what they called Judas. His name was Yehuda, but he was a zealot. There were different types of Jews then, just as there are now. Remember, Baruch Goldstein was a zealot. He took matters into his own hands. He really believed Yeshua was the Messiah, and he saw the miracles that Yeshua did. So he believed that if he gave up Yeshua to the Romans, that Yeshua would declare himself to be the Messiah and would wipe them all out. That's what he believed. He believed he was Mashiach ben David. But the Torah alludes to 2 types of Messiahs. One is Mashiach ben Yosef, the suffering servant, and one is Mashiach ben David, the conquering servant. Yeshua wasn't coming then to conquer Rome. That wasn't his mandate. God wanted him. He was given a purpose, a role, like Moses was. Moses was given the role of bringing the 10 commandments down from Mount Sinai into the hands of the people to bring to all the nations of the world. We were to be a light, or legoyim. We were no longer a light to the nations when we were in Rome. We had become corrupt. People were without a shepherd. They didn't know where they were going or what to do. And Yeshua was born at that time and given a purpose to bring our people back to the Torah of Moses, to his commandments. And that's what he did. And not only that, but he was making the message more universal. It was going to be not only for the Israelites, but also the stranger among us, those who joined us. And he wasn't killed to die for the sins of the nation. He was killed because he was accused by his own people of being a political agitator, of saying that he was God, which he never did. You won't find any of the words.
That statement, I just want to tell you, while he may have been an agitator by some people, but he wasn't accused. I'm taking a little exception to that. He wasn't accused by his own people. That connotes 100%. I'm
No.
telling you, less than
He was
1%.
exactly.
A very small, and those small people were not even in control of themselves. They were acting
Exactly.
under other authority anyhow. So
Same as happening in the world today.
that's
You
right.
have a small group who control a lot of people. Most people don't like what's going on.
And that's what happened exactly in the Second World War. You have one or two or three guys, the heads of the nation, and they make all the people go crazy. They killed 50 million people plus.
Exactly. I remember, have you ever seen the movie Defiance? It's a true story about the Bilski brothers in Belarus. And their parents were four brothers. And these two brothers were out in the woods. And when they came back, their parents had been killed by the, I don't know if it was the Ukrainians or what section they were living in, but they were murdered. And they found a young brother hiding under the underground in a hiding place, and another brother had been away as well. So these four boys, ran out into the woods, and they started to find people who were also had run away into the woods to hide from the Nazis. And there was one group of people who came to them, and they said, our little village has now become a ghetto. And we've heard rumors that the Nazis are coming and they're going to wipe everybody out. Can you please come and talk to the rabbis and tell them to leave this ghetto? They were still able to go. So the Bilski brothers went to them and tried to reason with them and said, listen, people are being murdered all over the place. And the few of the rabbis and the elders, they said, no, we're waiting for the Messiah. And they would never do that to us. And we are not leaving, and we don't think anybody should leave. So really just a few people decided on their own to escape, but they listened to the rabbis who said, no, it's okay, we can stay. The same thing when, what was the name of that man who came and he made way for, I think 1 million people to be able to move to Israel.
Brzezinski or something.
Yeah. I can't remember.
It's Winsky.
Something like that. He was from Poland.
Yeah.
And he Zabotinsky, and he begged the Jews of Poland to leave, and they refused. So we've seen this over and over in our history. And the thing that I love about this, I wrote something here. Here we are in 2023, when anti-Semitism is on the rise again. And we ask ourselves, how can this happen? Only a short 76 years after the last Holocaust on our people. It seems that as a whole, we have forgotten our Creator. But before that, wait a minute, I had written something else. So just let me read it before we finish here. Next week, we will celebrate Pesach with our families and friends. It's our new year. During the Seder, we will tell the Exodus story, as we have done for 4,000 years. Pesach is the first of the Moedim, which are God's appointed times from back in Genesis. And Pesach serves as a prototype for what our people would experience throughout the ages. We would dwell in a foreign land for a set period of time, surrounded by idolatry and enticed by its ways. After all, they look good. Their gods can be seen and touched, while ours is invisible. And only too late do we find out that this lifestyle comes at a great cost. By then, we've already been enslaved to its culture and leaders who suddenly turn their eyes upon us to see that we are not one of them. They are reminded that we serve a different God, even if we don't acknowledge him ourselves. They turn against us. They persecute us. They expel us from their land or try to annihilate us. We lose everything except the one who formed us, our Creator. He hears our cries. He comes to our rescue. We serve him for a time out of sheer gratitude, and then the cycle repeats. So the story of Pesach is really a story that has been repeated time and again throughout our history. And I don't know how many more cycles will continue before, as he says, he will come as a refiner's fire. And as you mentioned, Jerry, and as lie and burn out the dross and the darkness of this earth so that we will only have light on this planet. Boy, I can't wait. What a time that's going to be. So if there is anything else, any last words before we close for this evening?
Yes, I'm just going to repeat what you said. For the people he wants to keep, he will not burn them out completely. He will burn out the evil that we have and cleanse us and keep us.
Yes, exactly. Jerry, if you'd like to finish with the blessing of the Kohanim, that would be wonderful.
I'm going to, as I mentioned earlier, I'm just going to make a little thing. We'll see how it goes. And it doesn't mean we have to continue this in the future, but you have to try different things.
No doubt.
Once in a while.
Yes.
Our God and our God of our fathers bless us with the threefold blessings written in the Torah by their servant Moses and spoken by Aaron and his sons, the priests. Blessed art thou, Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified Kohanim with the holiness of Aaron and commanded Kohanim to bless thy people Israel with love. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'kidushaso shel Aaron v'tzivanu levarech es amo Yisrael b'ahava. Yevarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'chuneka Isa Adonai panav Elocha V'yasem lecha shalom. V'samu et shemi al b'nei Yisrael v'ani avorchem.
May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord shine his face upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift his countenance upon you and give you peace.
Amen, amen, and amen.
So shall they put my name upon the children of Israel, and I will bless them.
Amen.
So we look forward to our Seders. We look forward to reading this beautiful story that our people have read for 4,000 years. And I pray that the generations that follow us, our children, and our children's children would turn back to our God in a timely manner so that we don't have to go through, in our generation, the refiner's fire and to go through a heavy time that we could see the reconciling of parents with children and children with their parents, so that when he does come, he will not strike the whole land with utter destruction. And so I wish you a Hag, Pesach Sameach. I will be, I'm so grateful that I will be holding a Seder this year, and Miriam and Baruch will be coming to my home. Jerry, I hope you have a wonderful Seder with your family, and may you be a light amongst in your family and amongst all those who know you, and in your circle of influence. May you shine the light of our Creator upon them.
And all your blessings and everything that you mentioned should fall, not fall, should be upon you, Peggy, and you should be well with your family and your friends.
Thank you.
Kol Yisrael.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Good night, everybody. And we'll see you, in God willing, in 2 weeks.